An 80-year-old veteran was brutally beaten inside a bank, in broad daylight, by 3 young men armed with sticks. They didn't rob the bank. They didn't take cash. They came straight for him, and they didn't stop until his body was motionless on the floor. The surveillance footage showed it all. An old man in a faded army jacket, standing alone at the ATM, and then the first blow to his back, then the second, and then a frenzy of violence no one dared to intervene in. Not the customers, not the staff, not even the armed security guard standing 20 feet away. But the story didn't end there. 3 hours later, something no one expected happened. A column of military vehicles arrived. Uniformed soldiers stepped out, not to retaliate, not to arrest. They entered the bank with a quiet force and did something that left the entire room in silence and the entire country in awe. Because when a nation forgets to protect its heroes, sometimes the heroes protect each other. His name was James Henderson, 80 years old, born in a small town in Mississippi, raised on cornbread, discipline, and the belief that you always stand when the flag goes up. At 19, he was drafted into Vietnam. By 21, he had 3 bullet scars and a silver star. But he never talked about the medals. He talked about the men he couldn't bring home. He worked after the war as a welder, married once, had a daughter he rarely saw, and lived alone in a modest apartment near downtown Lexington. He came to the bank every second Tuesday, always at 9 a.m., always in the same faded army jacket, the one with the patch still clinging to the shoulder, and the zipper that never quite closed. Some tellers smiled out of habit. Most didn't look up. To them, he was just another old-timer, slow, quiet, forgotten. But James was more than that. He still ironed his shirts every morning, still saluted the flag on TV during parades, still kept his shoes polished, even if no one noticed. He never raised his voice, never asked for help, and never saw himself as a victim. That morning, when the attack happened, James didn't cry out. Even after the first blow knocked him into the counter, even when his body gave way and collapsed to the floor, he raised his arm, not to protect himself, but to shield the young woman behind him, a stranger. The men didn't care. They beat him until his hands stopped moving. That was who James Henderson was, a man who fought in a war, returned to a country that barely noticed, and still chose to protect it again and again, even when no one was watching. And that's why, 3 hours after the attack, when the military trucks pulled up outside the bank, they weren't there because of policy. They were there because of him. Because when word reached Fort Dawson about what had happened to Staff Sergeant James Henderson, his brothers-in-arms didn't wait for permission. They came to stand for the man who had never stopped standing for them. The moment James Henderson stepped into the bank that morning, no one suspected what was about to unfold. He moved slowly, steadying himself on his cane, eyes fixed on the teller as he approached the ATM. The faded army jacket he wore carried decades of history, but inside, James was just trying to withdraw some money to cover his bills. Suddenly, the silence shattered. 3 young men appeared from the corner of the room, their faces hidden under hooded sweatshirts. They moved with purpose, and their eyes locked onto James like predators zeroing in on their prey. Without warning, one of them swung a wooden stick hard against James's back. James staggered but refused to fall. His breath caught, pain shooting through his ribs, but he tried to keep his balance. The men surrounded him quickly, shouting obscenities that echoed through the bank's cold marble walls. No one intervened. The other customers froze, eyes wide with shock and fear. The bank staff stepped back, their faces pale and uncertain. The security guard, stationed near the entrance, made no move. Perhaps he thought it was safer to wait for backup. Perhaps he believed it wasn't his place to step in. But the attack didn't stop. The sticks came down again and again. James tried to shield himself with his arms, but the blows rained down relentlessly. His knees buckled and he fell to the floor. Even then, the attackers continued, kicking and striking without mercy. In the chaos, James's hand instinctively moved, not to protect himself, but to shield a young woman standing behind him, a complete stranger. His protective instinct never faded. even in the face of cruelty. When the beating finally ended, James lay motionless, blood trickling down his temple, his face bruised and swollen. The attackers fled before anyone could react, disappearing into the streets as if nothing had happened. Still, no one came to help. The silence in the bank was deafening. The staff quickly locked the doors, pretending nothing had occurred. The customers, still stunned, made no move to call for emergency services. It was as if James had been invisible. Yet, the footage from the bank surveillance cameras told the real story, the brutal truth that no one dared to acknowledge aloud. The video showed a man who had given his youth and strength to protect his country, now left defenseless and abandoned on a cold floor. Word of the attack spread quickly, stirring anger and disbelief throughout the community. How could this happen? How could a veteran, an 80-year-old man, be treated with such cruelty in a place meant to be safe? Questions mounted, but answers were slow to come. The local police launched an investigation, but the trail was cold. The attackers had vanished without a trace. For James Henderson, the beating was not just a physical assault. It was a painful reminder how far society had turned its back on those who had sacrificed the most. He had fought in a war that many have forgotten. He had returned home with wounds that time could never fully heal. And now, even in his twilight years, he was still fighting for dignity. Yet, despite the pain and the injustice, James refused to let bitterness consume him. When friends asked if he wanted to press charges or seek revenge, he simply shook his head. "I did my duty once," he said softly. "Now, it's time for others to do theirs." His resilience inspired those who heard his story, but it also sparked a deep sense of outrage. How could a nation that prides itself on honor and respect allow such an atrocity to happen inside its own walls? The incident became a rallying point. Veterans groups demanded answers. Community leaders called for action, and as the public outcry grew louder, the military made a decision that surprised everyone. Because when a nation forgets to protect its heroes, sometimes the heroes protect each other. As the video showing 80-year-old veteran James Henderson being brutally attacked inside the bank spread rapidly across social media, a wave of outrage swept through the community. People could hardly believe that a man who had served his country with honor was being viciously assaulted in broad daylight, in a place that should have been safe for everyone. Local news outlets quickly picked up the story, accompanied by furious and sympathetic comments. "A symbol of bravery beaten like a nobody," one article stated. "What kind of society allows this to happen?" a reader commented online. Veteran groups across the region voiced their condemnation. They organized emergency meetings, demanding that authorities hold the bank, security personnel, and perpetrators accountable. The incident quickly escalated from a personal assault to a symbol of injustice and society's neglect of those who served. Local officials felt unprecedented pressure. The city police chief held a press conference pledging a thorough investigation, promising to catch the culprits and protect the public. Yet despite the passage of time, leads remained scarce. The attackers vanished without a trace, fueling public anger even more. But the community's shock was nothing compared to the military's response. News of James Henderson's attack not only shook civilians, but struck deeply within his fellow soldiers and former comrades. An order from the Fort Dawson Military Command, where James had served, came swiftly and clearly: intervene and protect veteran Henderson at all costs. Within hours of the incident, a convoy of military vehicles rolled up the bank. Uniformed soldiers, fully equipped, took positions inside and around the building. They weren't just securing a building. They were protecting a living symbol of courage and sacrifice. The scene of the military surrounding a downtown bank stunned passers-by, whose curious and astonished faces watched silently. No one expected such a personal case to lead to a large-scale military lockdown. Local newspapers quickly dubbed it the unthinkable military response. Inside the bank, James Henderson received careful medical attention. Military doctors promptly checked his injuries and monitored his condition. But more importantly, he regained a sense of safety and dignity, no longer alone or abandoned. The military spokesperson at a press briefing on-site not only announced plans to track down the assailants, but also sent a powerful message to society. We will never abandon those who stood to defend our country. When one of them is harmed, the entire military community rises in response. Veteran groups held marches and protests, rallying collective strength to demand societal change in how older veterans are treated. They call for not only legal protection but respect, gratitude, and practical care from government and citizens alike. However, in the days following the military lockdown, new shocking details emerged, adding tension to the situation. Security camera footage and witness reports revealed that James's attackers were not random assailants. They had been hired by a criminal syndicate involved in money laundering and illegal activities connected to the bank. James had unknowingly become a witness after noticing suspicious transactions in his account. The incident was no longer a mere act of violence. It was a dangerous conspiracy to silence a whistleblower. This explained why the military's intervention went beyond guarding James. They collaborated with federal law enforcement in a large-scale investigation. Rapid response teams and intelligence units were deployed to identify and dismantle the criminal network. As the city remained under lockdown, fear grew among residents about the hidden threats lurking beneath the surface. For James Henderson, however, the greatest worry wasn't the external enemies, but whether society would learn from this tragedy. Would those who once stood on the flag, fighting for freedom, be truly honored and protected? The siege lasted several days, with media following every twist and turn. James's story became more than just one of personal bravery. It became a symbol of the ongoing battle for justice, dignity, and compassion in modern society. When the bank doors finally opened and the criminals were arrested, James emerged into the arms of comrades and citizens alike. Everyone realized that victory wasn't just in punishing the guilty, but in the power of a united community standing for what is right. After days of investigation and the military lockdown at the bank, the truth finally emerged, shocking everyone involved. The attackers who targeted James Henderson were not random strangers, but part of an organized crime syndicate using the bank as a front for money laundering and corruption. While reviewing his accounts, James had stumbled upon suspicious transactions, unknowingly becoming a threat to their operation. The investigation revealed that several high-ranking bank officials and even some local government figures were involved, sparking a scandal that rocked the community. Thanks to James's determination and swift military intervention, the criminal network was exposed and swiftly arrested. The community's reaction was overwhelming. James was no longer just a victim. He became a symbol of justice and courage. Rather than withdrawing after the incident, the military established a long-term support program for elderly veterans, ensuring their health, mental well-being, and safety. James's story ignited a flame of change across society. Organizations, authorities, and citizens united to protect those who serve the nation from violence and neglect. No longer alone, James became a powerful voice, appearing on media platforms, inspiring countless others. This event went beyond punishing the perpetrators. It ushered in a new era of respect and protection for those who sacrificed for freedom. As the peaceful sunset cast its glow, James stood before the bank, no longer a victim, but a beacon of hope and justice, a testament to the power of resilience and unity. James Henderson's story is not only a wake-up call about the injustices veterans can face, but also a vivid testament to the power of courage and perseverance. Despite sacrificing for his country, James confronted violence and indifference within his own community. Yet, it was his unwavering bravery and determination that ignited hope for many. The strong community response and the dedicated support from the military proved that when we unite, no force can suppress truth and justice. This serves as a powerful reminder of our collective responsibility to honor, protect, and stand alongside those who have served the nation. James is not just a wounded veteran. He is a symbol of resilient spirit and undying faith in justice. His story calls on us not to remain silent in the face of injustice, not to turn away from pain. Every small act, every courageous voice, has the power to bring profound change to society. Let us rise together to protect and celebrate people like James, the silent heroes in our lives.